Welcome to another podcast episode of Indigenous Roots and Hoots, produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. Indigenous Roots and Hoots is about Indigenous people and culture, past and present, success stories and inspiring stories about Indigenous people and what they are doing today. Whether it's arts, music, sports, business, education, and so on, Indigenous people are affecting positive change in their communities throughout Canada. Our aim here is to create a better awareness about Indigenous people to help bridge the gap of understanding for the reconciliation process in Canada to grow.
Hello and welcome to this podcast of Indigenous Roots and Hoots, produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. I'm your host, Gordon Spence, and our guest today is Mr. Jim Compton from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Jim Compton was the first Indigenous broadcaster on CBC News from 1982 to 1992. He won 2 Human Rights Awards for his documentary specials on Indian policing and the Peguis land surrender of 1911. He also won 2 Geminis for a series titled Sniff and a Gemini for a 2-hour primetime special titled Drums, looking at Indigenous issues across Canada. Jim is a founder of APTN, the Aboriginal Peoples Television Network. Mr. Compton also worked with the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples and is the artistic director at the Adam Beach Film Institute. Jim's company, titled Rising Day Media, has produced, written, and directed numerous documentaries. His list of productions spans 4 decades, all speak to the spirit and the resiliency of his people, their struggles, their hopes, and their achievements. Hello, Jim. How are you today?
Good, Gordon. Good to see you again.
Yeah. Nice to finally get a chance to do this with you. I've been thinking about you, trying to track you down, and finally we get this opportunity to speak with you. So maybe you can start by talking a little bit about your background, your family, where you come from, your cultural identity, a bit about yourself and your whole community.
Sure. Well, my First Nation is Peguis First Nation. As you can see behind me, I've got the symbol there, and it's where my mother was from. Where my mother went to residential school at the St. Philip's residential school, one of the many residential schools across Canada. So my relatives are there. I'm now living in Winnipeg, and my wife is from Sandy Bay First Nation, and so I have relatives this way. I also have relatives through my aunties up in Indian Birch, Sapatawiak, and my brother. My brother was adopted into, and of course, you know my brother Gordon.
Yeah,
West Este. He was adopted into Sioux Valley First Nation, Birdtail First Nation, and so I have relatives that way too. So yeah, I have Indigenous relatives there. My father was James Compton, and he was from Prince Edward Island. He claimed to have Indigenous roots there with the 4 First Nations that are there, and and my father was a Korean War veteran, stationed here in Winnipeg, and met my mother here in Winnipeg when she was a candy striper at the St. Boniface Hospital, and he was in there for checkups.
Okay.
So he had been in the Korean War. He was wounded, and so he was in there on and off. Anyway, so that's sort of the broad strokes of my background, and
that's how your father met your mother.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Through a war injury.
Where is Peguis anyway? Is that in Saskatchewan? Or?
Yeah, it's just over the line. Most people don't know Manitoba, but if you take the 16, and you go north from Yorkton, you'll go to a place called Kamsack, and just north of Kamsack are 3 reserves. Right. There's Cody's, Peguis, and Keys. So those are the three reserves that are in close proximity. One of actually the Peguis and Cody's are side by side. Yeah. So I mean I spent my cultural time there with the Sundance.
Yeah.
We go every year. My mother, that's where she has all her relatives, and that's where I have my cultural connections with my my uncles and my nieces and my cousins.
Yeah.
So I take the trip. It's about a 4 or 5 hour drive from Winnipeg to get up there.
I had read, I think maybe in your biography, you mentioned you said you're Anishinaabe, and now to me Anishinaabe is Ojibwe, and but Kisikos, isn't that Cree country?
Well, you know what? My I'll tell you a little story. My auntie was from Kisikos, married into Indian Birch, which is Cree. So she spoke fluent Cree, and the chief Kisikos, he was in Pine Creek and Sapatewiak. Sapatewiak used to be an Anishinaabe Soto reserve, and now they speak Cree. So the history of the Anishinaabe Cree in that area, because of the alliances for trapping and trading and hunting, they intersected there. So what you had was a unique mix of Soto, Cree, Anishinaabe, and so when you go up that way, you'll find a lot of them can speak the Cree and the Soto, which is a mix. So yeah, there is I would say an alliance between the Cree and the Anishinaabe there, and that's why you get people called the Soto. Well, yeah, the Anishinaabe in that area up around Indian Birch and Sapatewiak and going west, what happened was the Anishinaabe needed to create an alliance with those trappers in that area. So there was a political alliance between the Anishinaabe and the Cree, and where that area Sapatewiak used to be Anishinaabe community. They used to hunt and fish and trade in that area. So yeah, I have my auntie was married into Indian Birch, and she could speak fluent Cree. And I have relatives that are now in Sapatewiak, and they could speak Cree as well. So yeah, there was a political alliance back then, and they also call themselves the Soto in that area. So that's us.
You are one of the first Indigenous broadcasters on the CBC network. Tell us about how you landed that role and your experience there.
Yeah. Well, I was a print journalist in Winnipeg. I started out with an Indigenous-based newspaper called Central City People. And then they changed it to Central City News because they thought it was too communist sounding, right? So Central City People was changed to Central City News. But basically, it's where I started. It was 1980. I had some journalistic experience from going back to school, Red River. I had a journalism diploma, and I also took journalism when I went to Brandon University, and also when I went down to the Institute for American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I became the editor there, and then I also did some work up in Boulder, Colorado, journalism, film studies. Right, so came back, needed a job, and Central City People was starting up. I became the reporter and the photographer, and I had an editor, a fellow by the name of Don Marks, very influential in the city of Winnipeg for journalism and getting the word out for Indigenous people. So that was the idea, is that we would get the word out for in relation to Indigenous people, and also all the people living in the community. So it was, if you look at it, was basically a reconciliation project back in 1980 to bring all those people together, tell their stories, and tell our stories. So that's where I got started back then. And then I applied to the film board to take film studies because I always wanted to be a documentary maker. And they weren't hiring at the time, but CBC had a program that was going across the country to hire people of diversity. But they already had hired their person who was out of Regina, a fellow by the name of Dan David, very well known in journalistic circles, probably in Ottawa, that area, and over here in Saskatchewan. Anyway, that program was starting, and there was another program in the city of Winnipeg called the Core Area Initiative. And so what I did is when I got turned down by the National Film Board, I applied to the Core Area Initiative to see if they could get me on at CBC because CBC had that program. I knew about that program. And they agreed to pay my salary for 1 year. So that's where I got my start. That was in 1982. I, researched for a year. I pitched stories. I don't know how in depth you want to get into it, but I really got my start when at the end of the 1 year contract, when they hired this fellow from Northern Ireland. And so he had a keen interest in the plight of Indigenous people because of what's happening in his own country and his own town there, Belfast. And so I pitched him on a story, and that story, very first story I did was the one that you had mentioned, which was it got a Gemini award for writing, which was called Sniff. So we did it. We did a two, and it was it was really in depth. So we did 2 documentaries for the Supper Time News. My contract was running out. We did the 2 stories, and because of the acclaim that it got, CBC quickly hired me, and my salary it doubled, and the rest is history. I started working with the Irish journalist, and then I started working with some of the other ones. I mean, you had to break ground, I guess, pay your dues. So I paid a lot of dues with working with an all white newsroom. But so I rose up through the ranks, and I did daily news, I did evening news, I did weekend news. I did all those, and I pitched another show which the networks were looking at the time, because this is during the Oka crisis, and they wanted to look at Indigenous issues across the country. And so we pitched and launched a 2-hour primetime special called Drums, which looked at the issues that were affecting Indigenous people, residential schools, murdered and missing women, back in 1992, 91. So we did a 2-hour primetime special, and it won a Gemini, the Canada Award. And so that was my television history. And so then I moved on from there.
Jim, you'd won 2 Human Rights Awards on your documentary specials. One titled Indian Policing, and the other was titled The Peguis Land Surrender, 1911, I think it was. Mm-hmm. Tell us a bit about these 2 awards and how much receiving the awards meant to you.
Well, maybe I'll start with Indian policing. Indian policing came out of the shooting of J.J. Harper. And I don't know if your audience would remember that, but J.J. Harper was a Grand Chief from, I believe, the Swampy Cree Tribal Council, or Island Lake Tribal Council, sorry. And he was connected to Elijah Harper, who was a member of Parliament at the time. So he was essentially murdered on the streets of Winnipeg by the Winnipeg police. And there was an investigation. And I did one of the news stories when it first came out, and because I knew Elijah. The funny story, and not funny story, but coincident story, is that I lived on Victor Street, which was close to the CBC, and my next door neighbor was Elijah Harper. So I would see him almost every day, in passing or, and he was such a nice, genuine, amenable person. And you probably know him, Gordon. Anyway, so when JJ Harper was shot, I called Elijah and got all the information, who to talk to and everything else. So we did the news story. But what had happened is, so we started looking at documentaries to find out, what were the issues behind his murder. And one of the issues was that there were no Indian police. There was at the time you couldn't find any. So you had an all-white police force, and of course today, if you look at what's happening with the Toronto police force, that's exactly what we had back there in 1990, I believe it was, or 89, one of those years. And so I did an in-depth documentary. I was a writer broadcaster, and we looked at Indian policing and why there were no Indigenous police. And then it was submitted to the Manitoba Human Rights Committee, and it won the award. And then the second one was
this when you were with CBC News?
Yes, CBC News. Yeah.
Okay.
And
yeah.
So you had reporters, you had writer broadcasters. I was a writer broadcaster, so my job was to look in depth at the issues, the events, and get into the issue. And the issue was at that time, why were there no Indian police? And we talked to all the police force. We talked to experts, and then we just walked the streets with a camera, and the incidents that came up. I mean, the police were always in contact. They were walking the streets. They were always in contact with Indigenous people. So it could have happened over and over again. So what you really needed was to provide public safety for Indigenous people, and the police force wasn't doing it. So we won an award for that story, and I was very proud of that one. The second one was the Peguis surrender in 1911, and I had. I'm a history buff, and when I used to go out and do stories, we did stories on the Peguis community, Peguis First Nation in Manitoba. They were always leading the march, for rights in the city of Winnipeg. They would march on Indian affairs and beyond the bullhorn and everything else. So
you're talking about the Peguis people?
Peguis, yes, the Peguis people. And I knew Louis Stevenson, who was the chief at the time, and he was very another very amenable, very giving, and he was a grand chief as well of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. But so I said, what's behind? And I of course I knew, because I did the research at the it's called the TAR, Treaty on Aboriginal Rights Research, and so I knew the story. So I pitched it to CBC as a documentary, and basically looked at how the Peguis people were, how their land and their community and their exile was carried out by the Department of Indian Affairs, so that the settlers of the Selkirk area could take their land. So they took their land. Right. They did not provide them any compensation. They just basically, through a fraudulent vote, when most people were out hunting, they paid the residents to vote to surrender the land, which they did not. So, and they called it the Peguis surrender of 1911. Anyway, so we went back, we interviewed the chief, we interviewed some of the people that were still alive from 1911 and what happened. And they took that story and they took it to court. They showed it in the court when they had for the land claim, for the compensation. Yeah. And the lawyer was, I think it was Doug McLeod, and it was Lloyd Stevenson was the lawyer there. He was from Peguis, and they used that documentary in the court case, and they were compensated for over $150 million. So I was very proud of that. But at the time, it did win another Manitoba Human Rights Award, and I have it on my wall.
Yeah.
So very proud of those two stories, and for me, it just goes to show you that having an Indigenous person that is looking for those stories to help move the ledger, the envelope forward for our people is so important, and so important that they be in those all white newsrooms, directing that. So I was very proud of those two stories.
Actually, I was just reading about the before we arranged this interview with you. I was just reading about the Peguis land surrender of 1911, and they were actually moved from where they were originally. They were like more south, closer to Winnipeg, and where they're moved to now is a flood zone, is it not? And
they were living in the Selkirk area. Some of them were living in a place called St. Petersburg, which is just south of the lakes. They were supposed to be moved too, but they stood firm, and it's a really unique story. And I just interviewed one of the historians who works with the Museum of Man and Nature, Trevor Grey Eyes. He's also a publisher here. Anyway, so he's writing a book on what happened to them, and for the majority of those people were moved to the swamplands of where they are now, which is north of, it's in the Interlake, just off of Lake Manitoba.
Yeah.
Lake Winnipeg. Lake Winnipeg. Sorry, Lake Winnipeg.
Yeah.
So so they are now in the floodplain. They do not get any compensation. They're looking to, like a lot of the southern farmers, get permanent dikes built to protect their homes, protect their communities. But that is their home. That is where they live. But they also have land in the Selkirk area, which they managed to get back through the compensation. But they haven't built there, and they haven't done too much there yet. But there's a lot of potential there. I know that they are talking right now with the community of Selkirk, the town of Selkirk, to develop something from an economic standpoint.
Good to hear.
Very good.
You also won a Gemini Award for drums, a 2-hour primetime special looking at Indigenous issues across Canada, and a 2-part series titled Sniff. Sniff, you tell us about Sniff. What was that about?
Sniff was my very, very first. Well, it actually was my second documentary, but I was interned through the Courier Initiative in Winnipeg to work on being a reporter, writer, broadcaster, and I had this story which I had been pitching, and nobody seemed to be interested in it, and it was called Sniff, and it basically was looking at a lot of the Indigenous youth in the community were either coming in from remote areas, and they were dealing with sniff. They were sniffing gasoline. They were sniffing solvents, and it was really, really affecting their health. So I pitched it. CBC, the editors at the time weren't interested, except for one Irish journalist who was one of the producers, and he was from Belfast. So he was intrigued, and he said, I'll work with you on this story. So we went out and we did the story. We looked at, how it was affecting, people in the north, people in the south, the communities, how it was destroying young people's lives. And it went on to win a Gemini Award. And so that was my first real documentary. It was a 2-parter. And I went from being an intern to a bona fide writer broadcaster, and doubled my salary. And I did do a number of documentaries with his name is Peter Werner, and then I gained some, I guess, respect from the rest of the white journalists there, and I ended up working with a lot of them as well. Right. So that was Sniff. That's
Winnipeg is maybe tell our listeners describe Winnipeg. I mean, Winnipeg is kind of a rough city, and there's Indigenous people that come from all over.
Winnipeg has the reputation of having a large Indigenous population, so much so that when the Vietnamese people were leaving Vietnam, they called them the boat people because they basically had to jump on boats to survive because they couldn't airlift them out. So what they started calling the Indigenous people here in Manitoba were the bus people, the people that came from bus from Northwest Ontario, Manitoba, Northern Manitoba, Saskatchewan, even as far as Alberta, and Winnipeg was the hub. And of course, Winnipeg is a very and still is a very racist city, and the reconciliation efforts are few and far between. Yeah, so that Winnipeg is known for that, and there's a lot of work to be done in relation to that. And I think a lot of those stories that we do, like when I talk about the Indian policing, I could do that story today, and you would still have the same results, with the proviso that the community is now starting to look at safety as one of their issues. And so you now have, and it was started here in Winnipeg, something called the Bear Clan Patrol. And so even the Indigenous people that are trying to end homelessness and, create jobs and, provide services for young people, street people, they are latching on to the fact that the white police forces are not going to provide it because they don't understand us. That from a self-government standpoint, we need to move into that area and we need to police ourselves. And otherwise you will have, another Tina Fontaine issue. You will have, Alicia Hudson was just murdered by the police. So you have a lot of people that are dying at the hands of the police because they don't understand our issues. And so one of the major issues is Indian policing. And I think that I am pushing to do another documentary on that as we speak, and we'll see what happens there. But I do documentaries wherever I can and wherever there's a need.
Yeah. You've done several other documentaries and film work in your successful career as a filmmaker. Is there one that stands out the most for you or has meant the most to you? I think you mentioned a couple of them. Sniff was one of them, the Peguis land surrender. Is there one particular one that stands out the most? I think you mentioned one that you were most proud of.
I'm proud of them all. Just to be upbeat, one of the best ones that I had done and I'm very proud of was the one I did on Winston Whitney. Winston Whitney, he was very influential, very entertaining, and he was an educator, right? And so we did a documentary called Kitasku, He Who Sings. And but he's not only a singer, he's very culturally orientated. And so we did this documentary, and of course, my own spin on it because Winston is more of a Wasakijak, and so
storyteller.
He's a storyteller, trickster. So he gets to you, but through his music and through his stories and everything else. So we did this back in 2006, I believe, and we put it to the festivals, and it won 2 awards as a music documentary, but it was also accepted to the Palm Springs Film Festival, and it was chosen out of 300 submissions. And so I asked the guy, I said, I love the documentary and it's a great story. And I asked the guy, I said, well, why did you choose it? And the guy said to me, he says, because it healed me. His stories and his songs and the way he deals with people was very uplifting. And he said, it's probably one of the most influential healing documentaries that he had seen. And So yeah, I mean, I just thought, wow, I didn't know it had that effect on people. And and then Winston also went on to win the or not win, but get the Governor General's award for achievement, right? So
Yeah.
I was very proud of that one. And Winston's a good friend of mine. I've known him. Well, we both know him from the University of Brandon, where he was a teacher.
I don't remember him being a teacher. There probably a different course that you took.
Yeah,
but I do remember. I know who he is.
He did native music. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe
is
after
that
he
right?
left, but yeah, he was there because he was adopted by my brother's wife's family in Sioux Valley. Yeah, he had horses there. He'd ride them, and he was also teaching at Brandon University. Yeah. So I knew him intimately, and so I mean, he told me his story, and it went on to win some awards, and also I think if you look at it, most people can watch it on Lumi, APTN Lumi. It's a great story. Yeah.
APTN what?
Lumi, Lumi. It's their digital platform where they run all their shows. It's a documentary. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, he's quite an entertainer. I've seen him entertain. I've seen him play guitar, sing at a few functions, and he's quite the entertainer. And it's so enjoyable to listen to his music and to the words that he speaks. And quite an incredible guy.
He is.
I wanted to before I forget, and it's not on my list of questions, but I wanted to ask you, and maybe mention, talk a little bit about your brother. I met your brother, Gordon Morris, years ago when we were young, going to university in Brandon, and I was an admirer of him, his character, and his personality, and just the wonderful person he was. Such a smart, good-looking guy, and he was very proud of his heritage. I could go on and on, but it was saddened me, and probably a lot of people, when he passed away several years ago. Maybe you could just, talk a little bit about him.
Well, my brother was, as you had said, he was very, very. He was my mentor. He's the one that I never would have went to university. He's the one that said to me, he was at university. He was taking the program there, and I had just graduated from high school. And he said, "Well, why not come to university?" And I said, "Well, university, what's that? Like, what do you do there?" I mean, that's how green I was. I mean, I was apprenticing to be a carpenter at the time. And he said, "Well, try it for a year," and I lived with him. But I never grew up with Gordon. Gordon was adopted out and believe me, these are strange stories, but he was adopted by a Dakota woman and her white husband, farmer husband. And basically what, back then, the people adopted Indigenous people to work their farms. I mean, so they were like indentured slaves. But through that Dakota woman, he learned the culture and it became very cultural. And certainly at the time, there was a renaissance with Indian activism. The American Indian movement was in full swing. The Red Power movement was in full swing across the country. And we had Indigenous professors at the University of Brandon, right? I mean, So, it was a movement. So I learned, from him how to basically be proud of who we were, to be proud of being Indigenous, and to stay in school and to take, that's where I did take journalism for the first time. So I was very, he was like my mentor. My father was more of a carpenter and not very giving, from a academic standpoint, but Gordon was full into academics, and you should read this, you should do this, you should grow your hair long. I mean, grow my hair long. So when you look at me and Gordon back in the day, we went from short haired Indians to long-haired braided men, and I remember the elder that had said to us, he was an elder for Indigenous people across North America, a fellow by the name of Philip Deere, and he said, I see one day where the people will grow their hair long once again and be proud of who they are, and it starts with you.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And so yeah, Gordon was very influential, and he had a hard life. I mean, he was adopted out, but the bond that we had together as brothers was amazing, and I really do miss him being around. Yeah.
I used to see you guys, always together in Brandon. And I think even
we're inseparable. We were like, they used to call us the Bobbsey twins, And my brother was 5 years older than me too, right? Like he was 5 years older than me, but he really loved the fact that we were brothers, and we shared everything. It was just it was magical almost.
I think the last time I saw you guys was together was when we worked with the Royal Commission on Aboriginal people
and
peoples, and we went out to Regina, and he made a presentation there, and probably the last time I seen him and talked to him, and he did actually do a really good presentation.
Yeah, he was doing
the Royal Commission, and
and
he was also he had a power group too, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. He through his sons and my son, they started a drum group called Elk's Whistle, and they went from being a very small drum group to being one of the best, and they did win the most prestigious powwows in the country. They cut many I was going to say albums, but CDs at the time, and distributed those. And he, my brother, I'll tell you a little aside. My brother loved Elvis, right?
Yeah.
And he loved that limelight. And so my brother took, and this is my interpretation, he took that limelight and turned it into an Indigenous limelight. So he used that to become a singer himself, and a very good singer, and also one of the most learned and prestigious Indigenous people in Indian country. Proud of him for that, and
I was at the time I knew him, I always thought that man, this guy could be the national chief of Canada. He certainly had a great personality, and
he was very politically inclined. He did run for the Liberal Party in Regina, and I helped him with his campaign. But he did have his health issues, and unfortunately, they caught up to him. Yeah,
God bless him.
Yeah, God bless him.
You're also the artistic director for the Adam Beach Film Institute. Tell us about your role there, and what does the Adam Beach Film Institute do?
The Institute is no more. I mean, basically what happened is we tried to, we started in 2012. So we went for about 8 good years. And within those years, what we wanted to do was to teach young people the basics of writing for television and film. And shooting, camera work, lighting, writing, and hosting. We had 2 programs there. One was called the Aboriginal Broadcast Training Initiative, which we started and trained, I would say 50, 60 people. Majority of them are still working in the industry. And we hired 20 of them when APTN started. I was the program director of APTN. So we trained them, we hired them, and they're still working. Adam wanted to start the Adam Beach Film Institute. We started that in 2012. We had 8 good years, but when COVID hit, we couldn't get any funding for 3 years, and it just killed us. But having said that, there are some training programs that have started, and I do believe they were because of the Adam Beach Film Institute that are running in Winnipeg, and they do get to go north. For example, you have a lot of them that travel up to the Situiasik, Nelson House, and Tataskuak, where you're from, Gordon, I believe.
Yes.
And so they do train. They do train. So the idea was just, hey folks, let's train these young people with our knowledge, and how can we get them excited and into the profession, so that we do have storytellers down the line. And I think that we did a good job, because a lot of them are there, and a lot of them are moving up. And me and you, Gordon, we're not getting any younger, so we're going to pass that torch on to them. Right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We're not getting any younger. That's for sure.
Yes.
We're getting close to the end here, Jim. Just got a couple more questions for you. Are you currently working on a film project now? And what are your future plans?
Well, Gordon, I'm working with your wife, Martha Flaherty, and we're looking at doing a film called Shadow of Nanook. And essentially what it looks at is, what happened to her and her family, and the Arctic exiles that were exiled to the north, to save us from the Russians, to save us from them invading, and to maintain Canada's sovereignty, which it still does. Up in her community of Grise Fjord and Resolute Bay, and those communities. So it was a terrible thing that happened, and it was recent. It was as recent as the 1950s that this happened. Right. And I remember when I was at the Royal Commission, I left CBC to go to the Royal Commission. The Arctic Exiles was a story that was out there, but most people don't know about it today. And I think that it's a travesty, and it's a shame that story is not told today. And so, right. Martha, I know that she wants that story told. I know that your children want that story told, and I know that the Inuit community wants that story told and recognized in places like the Canadian Human Rights Museum, so that the world does not forget. You have museums that with the philosophy is never forget, lest we forget. Well, let's not forget what happened there as well. And so we're working right now to raise some money to tell that story. And I believe because of the spirit of that story, that it will come to light, and it will fulfill Martha's wishes to be recognized within that Canadian Human Rights Museum.
Well, I certainly look forward to helping you out on that, and so is Martha. She's kind of pretty geared up for that. And
she's not getting any younger either. So I mean, I think that time is of the essence, and I think we need to tell that story. Yeah, for sure.
Final question here for you, Jim. There's always this talk recently about reconciliation in Canada, and different people have, their different views, different thoughts on, reconciliation. How do you feel about this reconciliation, and how we can make Canada a better country for everyone?
Well, I think that, I could say it in one word: safety. I think that safety. Indigenous people need to feel safe within their own communities, right? Whether it be remote, on the reserve, and or in the cities where we still maintain our rights as Indigenous people. So we need to look at, and I mentioned this before, but what are the self-government institutions, and what are they doing to promote that safety? I mean, places like here in Winnipeg, we have End Homelessness. We have the Main Street Project. We have the Thunderbird House. We have the Aboriginal Council of Winnipeg. We have, I would say, over 30 groups that are working within that area. And what they're looking for is to provide that comfort and that safety to live their lives. And, so a lot of them are looking towards, well, if the Winnipeg police force is not doing it for us, how are we going to do it? And, that's another documentary that I'm trying to revive, looking at public safety. Once you can get public safety in your community, no matter where you live as an Indigenous person, then you can exercise your self-government, your self-determination, and make a better place for your children. And that's what we need to do. And so that's how I see reconciliation. I may not ever see it in my lifetime, but certainly I'd like to see it in the lifetime of my grandchildren, because they have to live in this world, and and they should feel safe wherever they go. So that safety just it seems to drive everything for me. Even with Martha, they should have been able to feel safe where they were, and not be at the whim of the RCMP and the government of the day. That they were taken from their safe communities into a hostile environment, and it still affects them today, and nobody knows about it. And so that's why we need to tell those stories and reconcile and change as we move forward.
Excellent. Well said, Jim. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
My pleasure.
And
anything, Gordon, I'll come back again if you want.
We will. We will definitely, once you finish this film with Shadows of Nanook, I'll come by and call on you again to have another discussion.
Yeah, for sure. So, definitely.
On behalf of the Legacy of Hope Foundation, I want to thank you. You're a talented filmmaker, talented person, great friend, trailblazer, role model. You're just a great person to talk to be around, and I really thank you on behalf of the Legacy of Hope Foundation for taking the time to do this. I know you're a busy guy, so Peguis, thank you.
Go up, men. We'll see you again.
Roots and Hoots is produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. For more podcasts like this, please visit our website at legacyofhope.ca.